Hi, Josh Stearns from Free Press here. You're watching Free Speech TV, and I'm here with Chris Anderson. Chris, you've got a new book out called Rebuilding the News, and you've spent years now studying what's happening to journalism, specifically in Philadelphia, both the new kinds of journalism that are being produced there, but also what's happening to the old legacy newspapers and other outlets there. Tell me a little bit about what's the big takeaway in your book.
You know, the big takeaway is that we are seeing old traditional journalism going away, and we are seeing new journalism entities and organizations struggling to make it and survive and maybe fill in some of the gaps that are being left behind by these decaying legacy media organizations. The old ones are going away, and we don't have new ones yet that are going to make up what we're losing by the decline of these traditional outlets.
So we're trying to leap between two moving trains, in a sense.
That's a great way of putting it, yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things I talk about in the book, one of the paradoxes is that, you know, the traditional media organizations, the traditional newspapers were not really all that innovative when they were trying to make this transition to online. And some of the most innovative organizations also had very little money, and they had very few resources by which they could, sort of enact some of their more forward-thinking new ways of doing journalism. So you had these rich companies, these rich organizations that didn't know how to innovate. You know, you had people that were really innovative, but who lacked the money, who lacked the time, who lacked the resources to make those, to make their dreams kind of become reality.
So, and you said in your book that one of the problems that journalism still faces is a problem with the public, or the publics. Tell me what you mean by that. And we here at the National Conference for Media Forum think a lot about the role of journalism with its responsibility to the public. Talk to me about what you saw in Philadelphia and what the problem with the public still is.
Sure. You know, I mean, journalists and traditional media organizations always thought that if there was a public, it kind of came through them, right? They were the public gatekeepers. If there was public information, public access, public participation in news, or public participation in politics, all of that public got filtered through large media organizations that by the 1980s were monopoly media organizations in the cities that they were in. But you know what, Josh? That was never true. There were always people in all of the cities across this country who did more than just read the Philadelphia Inquirer. They listened to, pirate radio. They listened to Democracy Now. They watched Free Speech TV. They read, alternative newspapers. And the problem is those people never, were all that invested in these traditional media companies. But you know what? The traditional media organizations didn't know that. As far as they knew, because they were the monopoly and they were, widely read and very powerful, they were the only ones that mattered, right? So the problem is that when you go to an online media system, when you go to a digital media system, you quickly realize as a journalist, as a reporter, you quickly realize, hey, wait a second, there are all these other people out there, and they actually don't really care about us all that much. And, maybe we're not the only game in town.
Right.
So the problem with the public for these media organizations was, wait a second, there are all these other people out there that, we've never been reaching or we've never spoken to. Now what do we do? And
now the public is speaking back through new mediums and that sort of thing. And that brings us forward to another piece that you worked on with Columbia University, Emily Bell at Columbia and Clay Shirky, and you wrote a piece called PostIndustrial Journalism. Yep. And tell me what that means and what you were getting at in that piece.
Post-industrial journalism was sort of a big picture overview of how the media landscape, the journalism landscape is changing, specifically in the United States. One good way of getting at what we tried to talk about in that report was this idea of, what does post-industrial journalism mean? The basic idea of post-industrial journalism and why we have the title that we do is that news used to be produced in a industrial process. News was an assembly line in which you had, a very standardized way of making the news, right? It was like building a car. Right. You had a couple companies and they all built the same car, and, you knew who the producers were and you knew who the consumers were and you knew the assembly line process by which a car got built.
And one of the reasons we start to see cars and news all look the same is because of that process, perhaps.
That's exactly right. right, that leads to sort of homogenization. And one of the things I think that is happening in kind of this new era is that we're in a post-industrial era. Okay. Production and consumption is blurred. There is no longer one process by which the news gets made, and there are a lot more organizations that are you no longer have the big three automakers of news making the news anymore. So that's really what we tried to get across in the Post-Industrial Journalism book or report. We have a great line in there where we say that, the problem in journalism, the presence of process is worse than the absence of money. Journalists, I think, spend a lot of time focusing on how, the reason why they're failing and flailing is that their business model is going down the tubes. That's part of it, but it's also a big part of it is that, their processes need to change.
And so people can read more about that at the Tao Center for Digital Journalism at Columbia University?
Indeed.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on today.